Hello, my name is Lincoln, Program Director here at P3C Pro. Today, I want to talk about a topic that I think is maybe one of the most important topics we can discuss, and this is finding balance. But I'm not talking about balance in terms of having a work to home life balance, or even in terms of, how do you create a little bit of zen and emotional balance in your life. What I want to discuss is how the movements of the body can influence the function of the brain. So I'm going to give a few details. Please just bear with me if it doesn't seem to make sense at first. How we are designed is that the movements of the body and the function of the brain are connected through signals sent through the spine. And these neurocircuits connect the left hemisphere of the brain to the movements of the right side of the body. And then, of course, on vice versa, you have the right hemisphere of the brain is connected to the movements of the left side of the body. So with this understanding, now I want to give a little breakdown into the difference of the functions of each hemisphere. So there's been a ton of research done on stroke patients, and many times with a stroke patient, they either lose the function of one hemisphere or the other. So what's cool is each hemisphere can work independently, and we can still live and function if one half of the brain shuts down. However, there is a drastic difference in now how people can function on a daily basis if one hemisphere is shut off. So the right hemisphere of the brain is where we find more creativity. This is where we explore new things. This is where one thing that's cool about the right hemisphere is it can view, it has a more wide lens view, so it can see the functions of a system and it can understand how each piece connects into the system and how each one is essential for the functioning of that system. The left side, on the other hand, is a little more fragmented. It is very much more closed-minded, and it will see how one thing works, and it will not quite understand how that connects to everything else. So the right side is way more open-minded. It can take in new stimulus, and it can figure out how that new stimulus works within the functioning of daily life or within whatever system it may need to partake in. Now, while the left hemisphere is more closed-minded or less understanding of what is outside its realm of knowledge, it is highly efficient at making a system run with a high level of effectiveness and efficiency. So what we can take from this is that the left hemisphere of the brain is where we want habits and routines to operate. But the right side of the brain is where we want to take in new stimulus. This is where, when we're learning a new skill, this part of the brain is activated. So how we move has an impact on brain activation. This is why, so someone who is right-hand dominant is going to be much more left brain dominant. Someone who's left-handed is going to be way more right hemisphere dominant. This is why a lot of times left-handed people seem to be more creative, because the right side of the brain is activated more. But what we also see is, since the left hemisphere of the brain is much more closed-minded and does not quite understand what happens outside its world of understanding, with the majority of the people being right-hand dominant and stronger on their right side, This is where you see a lot of divide within the world. And it makes sense because when you understand what you know and you start to think that nothing else matters or everything else is wrong, you can see where we have political divide. You can see where we have divide between different races and different nations because you don't understand the other culture. You don't understand why they are doing what you're doing. So you assume they are coming from your perspective and taking action through the way that you understand things, but they don't. They understand things totally different. So when we are exercising, when we are creating or implementing a training program, it is so vitally important to try to find a connection between both sides of the body equally. Because when you are able to find a connection through the right side of the body and the left side of the body, and then you're able to connect those movements so they move with symmetry, you are able to simultaneously create that same connection through the activation of your neurochemistry. So not only do we want to just find symmetry through the body, but also one thing that plays a huge role in achieving balance is finding the tension of the opposite. So tension creates balance. This is why in a political system, you have the right side and the left side. You need both to create balance, because when one side goes too far, the other side can pull them back to the middle. And then if they gain a little too much power, then there is an equal pull in the opposite direction that brings everything back into harmony, into balance. So while we see that there is a ton of divide within the country, you need opposing viewpoints to create an optimal system. So likewise, within fitness, we want to train our body we want to, for one, add new stimulus to activate the right hemisphere of the brain, but we also want to train through different styles. We don't want to just strength train. We don't want to just stretch. We don't want to just run. While all those have benefits independently, and it's not wrong to do any of those, when we just do one style of movement, you are only activating the left hemisphere of the brain, or you move more into a left hemisphere function because you understand what you understand and you don't go move outside that box. This is also where I get very irritated on social media when I see trainers saying you only need to do a set amount of exercises. They're like, you can do these 9 exercises and this is all you ever need to do. They say that with good intention because strength training is proven to be one of the greatest indicators of longevity and maintaining a healthy body long term. So strength training is essential. Everybody should be strength training in some way. But if you just strength train and if you just do 9 movements, then those movements become a habit and routine, and then you just keep staying within this left hemisphere. And then it over-dominates, and then that impacts every other element in life. So while you do want that strength training, you also want to add in new exercises. But when you're adding new exercises, you don't just want to randomly do new exercises. If you start just randomly doing new movements and you have no structure in place to where they fit into a system, then you do the opposite, and then you're just running with no direction. You're just exploring with nothing to keep you grounded. So that is why it is essential to integrate new movements, but it's essential to integrate those new movements into a system to where you can take this new stimulus and you can take it and you can create habits and routines. And so when you do a new movement, it activates maybe muscle fibers that have been dormant for some time because maybe you've never moved in that way, or maybe you are lengthening a muscle and your body just isn't used to it. So there is new activation. Your body has to work to understand what it is doing. But then once you do that movement and that movement becomes repetition and you do it over and over again, then it moves from a right hemisphere domain to a left hemisphere domain. And then it is a habit, and then it becomes routine. But once that happens, then you want to add in new movements. But it all needs to work within a system that has structure. But the structure needs to continue to explore and expand within this right hemisphere to activate that side of the brain so we continue to take in new stimulus, we continue to identify how it can be added into the system and create a new benefit. But then when we want to optimize it and we want to make it efficient, we need to create a structure with it so it transfers into that left hemisphere domain. So this is why when we are exercising, we are kind of out of our mind if we're not very intentional with how we are training. Because when we move, we have the potential to activate either a single hemisphere or both hemispheres and create a balance. And when we create a balance through the neuroelectricity of our left and right hemisphere of the brain, we create a balance in the way we view life. We create a balance in the way that we interact with people. We become more open-minded, but we also have a value system to rely on. We are able to see new things, experience new people, new places, understand why people do what they do, and try to understand it from their perspective rather than just understanding everyone else's actions from our own. But we also want to have our structure in place, our foundation that we can build upon. The left hemisphere is our routines and our foundation. The right hemisphere is where we learn and explore and evolve. So this is why when you begin to understand how vitally important it is to have a creative but systematic structure to your training program, you really begin to understand how the way we move truly influences the way we live.